Hello, everyone. My name is Julie McVey, and this is Unordinary Made Ordinary, where we talk about extraordinary experiences of everyday people. After today's interview, if you would like to continue the conversation of all things metaphysical, paranormal, and supernatural, feel free to join our private UMO group by clicking on the link in the video description. And today, our guest is Wayne Bush. Welcome to the show, Wayne.
Thanks, Julie. I really appreciate you having me on.
I am very excited that you are here. I don't know if you know this, but I began this show not only because I am super fascinated with the supernatural, paranormal experiences of others, but ever since childhood, I have had endless unanswered questions about why we're here and what happens after we die. And I think that might have something to do with feeling completely out of place on this planet from a very early age.
Me too. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, a lot of people who I feel like who watch this show feel similarly. And not very long ago, I was caught up in a religion that sort of discouraged investigating and asking questions that went against, the accepted teachings of the church. And I swore to myself I was never going to dismiss evidence without seriously considering all the possible data presented. And, no matter how outside of the box the material was or how much it was against the current accepted norms and beliefs. And a friend of mine turned me on to your work, Wayne, and your website, Tricked by the Light. And after reviewing some of the material and listening to several of your interviews, I became very intrigued with the evidence you've been able to accumulate over the last couple decades. So I'm super excited to have you share, about your journey into these topics and about some of your research into the areas of why we're here, reincarnation, and the afterlife.
Oh, okay.
So if you wouldn't mind, could you just maybe share a little bit about yourself?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm a retired computer programmer. I'm living in Austin, Texas. And I still devote a lot of my time to the research, answering emails, working on the website, doing interviews, stuff like that. And I'm trying to stay balanced now by having a little more fun, try to learn and play guitar and piano and tennis and things like that. But my background, I mean, it was a fairly normal childhood. Growing up in like a typical Midwestern middle-class family. It was, Central Ohio, Columbus area. And, when early on, it was pretty typical. I mean, I was an average kid. I liked sports and listening to music. But I remember just being unhappy basically with life. And I don't know whether it's because of the really bad weather in Ohio or having to go to school all the time. But I remember like telling my friends all the time, this sucks. I just remember saying that quite a bit. But I did pretty well. I mean, I was like a straight A student. And so I tried. And I just remember I really liked music, and I would kind of come home after school and every day and like be putting on my records and stuff. And I remember like maybe that's like the first exposure I really got to some of this material. I mean, just to give you, I guess, a little more background, it wasn't like a real religious family. My parents they were Catholic, and they sent me to catechism, and it was only like once a month. They just wanted to kind of give me a little fundamental background on it, so I had a somewhat understanding, but they weren't like really fundamentalist about it. So, but yeah, I would come home after school and I'd play my records and play a little basketball. But like the records, I remember I would listen to like Pink Floyd. Of course, they had Dark Side of the Moon, which has some mind-blowing concepts, and then, concept albums. And then I remember like a couple of my other favorite albums were like Grand Illusion by Styx. And they're like saying everything's a grand illusion.
Yeah.
And then like another band I liked was ELO, Electric Light Orchestra. I used to like the album. I liked all of them, but Out of the Blue, like I would come home and play that. And he's got this huge UFO on the cover, right? Basically. And so, they're taught their song, Come Sail Away. I thought that they were angels, but to my surprise, they boarded this starship and headed for the skies. So, just stuff like that. I think it kind of planted a seed maybe for some of these ideas.
Interesting. Didn't do that
uh,
for me, but that's pretty cool that it did for you.
So yeah, I played sports, and then I played drums in high school. I guess that's carrying on with the musical theme there. And then I started university at Ohio State and business degree. And halfway through, we, as a family, decided to move to Austin, Texas. So I went to University of Texas, and I just remember I was also doing like data processing. So I had these long hours in the lab, right? To the point where, like, I remember one night I didn't get any sleep whatsoever. And then the next night I got like a couple hours, to the point where I was like getting delirious, you know? And I was trying to do a job at this golf company, and I was like working 20, 30 hours a week there. I was doing something that nobody else knew how to do. So it was a lot of responsibility. So I was like getting hardly any sleep. I just at some point questioned, what's the meaning of all this? I mean, why am I doing all this? What's the point? And so I did a little bit of research. I mean, it was kind of, at least to me, I kind of was like self-apparent that maybe there was a God, because there seemingly was a design to everything here. So I was kind of saying, well, that kind of implies there's maybe a designer. So I did a real quick research. I didn't have much time on like different religions. Like I bought a book on all these different religions, and it was probably from the perspective of a Christian. So it was a little biased. Maybe not balanced, but I decided, well, you know, there was a calendar change a couple thousand years ago, and you know, most of society accepts Christianity and Jesus. So
yeah,
it wasn't, you know, maybe the best criteria for making a choice, but I decided to become a Christian, and I took it pretty seriously, and to the point where I was like I was going like every Sunday and even on Wednesdays.
wow.
And I wanted to like understand the Hebrew and Greek, so I bought like this interlinear Bible. But then at some point, when I got out of college, I got my own place, and I was hanging out by the swimming pool, and I was meeting new people, right, and friends. And so a couple of them became my best friends, and one was this guy from California, Drew, and he wore a crystal around his neck, and he was really into UFOs and aliens. And then my other friend that I played tennis with was Rohit. He was Indian, so he had a totally different background than what us, you know, Westerners did. And he wasn't like real religious, but he did open my mind to things other than like my first thought about the UFOs and the aliens. Oh, they're demons, you know, and all that. So I'd have long conversations with my friend about that, and I'd ask him so many questions, but he always had a good answer for everything. And so we started going down to this bookstore here in Austin called Book People. It's like touted as like the best, touted as the best, the biggest bookstore in the Southwest or something. But it had like three stories, and a whole third level was metaphysical books. And so I would go down there all the time and just go through shelf by shelf by shelf. And he would go off to the UFO section. And I was intrigued more with the spiritual thing. So I saw some books on reincarnation and near death. When I first saw the books on near death experiences, I was like, wait, what? And I was Christian. So there was a book called Embraced by the Light, and Betty Eady had like met Jesus during her NDE. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So I bought that book, and I don't remember what order I bought the stuff in, but I bought Saved. That was Embraced by the Light. And I bought Saved by the Light by Daniel Brinkley. I had a little bit of a different take on it. And then I found out that like Raymond Moody had coined this phrase, near-death experiences. So at some point I bought Life After Life, which was like a fantastic overview of the tunnel and light and everything. But yeah, so then I guess to fast forward a little bit, I started listening to this paranormal-based radio show by Art Bell. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he had a show called Coast to Coast AM, and he would interview people from, you know, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, just everything you can imagine. And then we started this Art Bell chat club, and there wasn't one in Austin, so me and a friend started it, and there really wasn't one in Austin, so we went down to the one in San Antonio, and I met this guy down there who was, I wouldn't say he was my mentor, but he knew a lot more than me. He was older, and he knew all kinds of stuff. So he would tell me about like, you know, Gnosticism. Like he showed me the Pistis Sophia, and it probably explained a little bit, which probably just went over my head. And then he showed me this book by Val Valerian. We go to the New Age bookstore, you knew the owner, and there's this book by Val Valerian called The Matrix. And there was like 3 or 4 or 5 of them he had, and they were expensive. They were like that thick and real expensive, but that kind of got me into it. And I just started reading everything I could get my hands on, you know, whether it was Zachariah Sitchin, David Icke, Robert Monroe, just anything and everything. And at one point I heard John Lear, who was a ufologist, I guess, and a pilot, and he was on the Art Bell show, and he told Art mentioned the light, right? That at the end of your life, you see this tunnel and light that you go to, and and John Lear told Art Bell not to go to the light, that it was a trick.
Huh.
And he said that Whitley Strieber had told him that. I'm like, wait, what? And that is just kind of like for a couple of years, it's just kind of always went back to that. Like, man, what is this trick? So it kind of inspired me to start my website, which was kind of named after Embraced by the Light, Saved by the Light. There's another book called Transformed by the Light. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to call mine Tricked by the Light. I'm going to investigate and explore this, possibility that maybe the light is a trick. And so I've just been amassing data and evidence for like 2 decades now. I mean, I put it up in like 2002, and then I didn't get any interest in it. I got like one email from somebody, and then so I took it down, and then I put it back up, and I probably had it up for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then in early 2012, I put it back up because I was like, oh, everybody's talking about the Mayan calendar, and what if really things I need to warn people, or at least get my my data out there, put it back up. So I kind of revamped it, and I just remember like every weekend, whenever I could, I'd just be just typing and typing and typing, typos everywhere probably, and I just throw it up there. And eventually I get started asking to do interviews. So yeah, that's kind of how it all came about.
Okay, and I have a quick question. I remember you saying, I don't know, one of your interviews, something about how you were thinking of later on how the name Tricked by the Light, you might have wanted to change it if you could, but what was that about?
Yeah, it's like on the top of my website that if well, Tricked by the Light, it might tend to generate a little bit of fear, oh my God, we're being tricked, that's scary. And so I felt like there's no reason, I didn't want to generate fear, that was not my intention. And so I kind of thought, well, if I could do it all over again, I would name it Transcend the Light. Because you want to go beyond the light. So like, I just want to say like upfront that I don't pretend to know the truth about what happens after death. And it's not my intention to generate any fear whatsoever, but rather to impart information that can maybe help empower people in making the best decision after death. So therefore I look at some of the evidence as that's not often discussed by other people. And, I'm not telling anyone what they should do. And I'm just sharing like some of the evidence of what I found in my research while I was looking for contradictions, inconsistencies, anomalies, deceptions, things like that. And they're just a small percentage of the overall data, but I feel they're very important when you're trying to determine if something is trustworthy or not, right? So I think people should do their own research and arrive at their own conclusions. And you can listen to what I say and accept what resonates as truth within your heart, but discard anything that doesn't ring true. So.
Really, that's what I did with the Bible. I mean, I just started looking at the contradictions and researching for myself, using my own, intuition and what resonated with me, what didn't. And I'm glad I did, because I feel like
I did the same thing. I mean, I started out as a Christian too, and at some point, that bookstore, I started reading other ideas like reincarnation. I kind of get into the new age, the quote unquote new age movement. Not that I believed everything, but I just wanted to know what possibilities are out there.
Well, did that kind of surprise you? Were you resistant to the idea of reincarnation at first because you had the Christian background?
I wasn't. My mom is.
Oh, okay, because I was resisting that idea the whole time I was a Christian, and after. It took a while. I just started believing in reincarnation, or being persuaded that it was an actual thing I feel like a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, were there books like, I can't remember the name, but like Murphy Bride, there were like cases, and I know like Ian Stevenson wrote a book like 20 cases suggestive reincarnation. I mean, I'd read some books, and they weren't like, I mean, there was good evidence and spontaneous memories that children would have or people would have. But it wasn't enough to like convince me, I absolutely know that reincarnation is true. It really wasn't until I started looking at the near-death experiences of people. I mean, I considered the near-death experiences to be the best evidence to look at, because some of them literally died. I mean, their heart stopped, maybe the brain activity. Some of them were put in a bag and put a toe tag on them. And I mean, it's the first initial glimpse, I think, into the afterlife. Although we don't really know what happened to the ones who didn't come back, right? It's just a limited amount of evidence to work with, but it's a good starting point. And I think some of them saw multiple lives. They saw quite a few of them
Right.
saw reincarnations. So that to me was pretty, because I think near-death experiences, they're more vivid and hyper real compared to what this everyday normal waking consciousness
This is more of
is.
a dream or illusion, apparently, and that's more real
Yeah.
on the other side.
Yeah. So, it's I feel like everything, all of existence is like a dream, different levels of consciousness. And when we go to sleep at night, we have dreams, and then we have like lucid dreams, we have out of body experiences, and we have this waking life. And then NDEs are even more hyper real. And then in some of the NDEs, they take them to levels beyond that. So it just seems like everything's varying levels of awareness or consciousness.
You said something that I find curious, that we don't know what happens to those who decide not to come back, or they're not sent back. And I've been wondering, why aren't mediums, and you may not have researched this or have the answer for this, but why aren't mediums tapping into to those who have had a death experience and they've got to make the choice to stay? You know what I mean? When someone
They
sees
do. I mean, I guess some of them do. I mean, let's be honest, not all of the psychics and mediums are on the up and up. I mean, but I do believe there are some that are legit. They do talk to spirits. Yeah, I mean,
have you heard of that then? Some have said, oh yeah, I'm tapping into so-and-so, and he had a death experience and he chose to stay.
Right. Yeah, I've heard. I mean, I've experienced psychic medium. I mean, people like James von Prague and Sylvia Brown, and some of the newer ones, John Edward, and then there's a couple more that I can't quite remember the name. But yeah, I've looked into it, but no, I'm not an expert on the mediumship end of it. I mean, a lot of it goes back to like spiritualism, and the all the ectoplasm, and there was a lot of fraud back then.
Oh even. Yeah.
But I just feel like some spirits can be deceptive, right?
Absolutely.
And you look at the Ouija board, and I think we all know experiences with that. Not that I mean, those are probably the lowest spirits, but there is trickery and deception involved. I'd like to learn more about the psychic medium, where they speak with people after they've died. I'm trying to get more into that area, but I just don't know that there's a whole lot of information. And like I said, I don't think it's as trustworthy as the people that have had near-death experiences.
Yeah.
And so that's why I put more of my energy and effort into them, and even astral travelers, out-of-body experiencers. So
yeah, I personally, since childhood, well, I don't know, maybe it was more teenagerhood or young adulthood, when I started learning about near-death experiences, and I was just fascinated. I thought it was so awesome. Have you had any did you have any spiritual or paranormal experiences growing up, or as a teenager or young adult?
After I was a teenager, when I first moved to Austin, when I got my first apartment, I was reading a lot of the Bible and religious books. And so I felt like my frequency was real high, because I was just focusing on purity. And one thing I did do was I asked God, I want to know the truth. So I set this intention of, I want to know the truth, whatever it is. And so that kind of set me off on a path. And so, yeah, one night I was laying in bed, and my whole bed started shaking and vibrating. And I thought, my God, this is an earthquake. And I got scared. It was pretty violent. So I got real scared. And I like prayed, like, oh, please let me live, that kind of thing. And I remember it stopped, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to ask my neighbor, like, hey, what about that earthquake, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to find out what it was on the Richter scale, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when I talked to people, it's like nothing, like nobody had that experience. It was just me. And it wasn't until years later, when I was looking at some of those books in the store on out-of-body experiences, and one of the symptoms was called bed shaking. And so I thought, oh my God, I was maybe on the cusp of having an out-of-body experience, and my fear shut it down. I could have had the most glorious experience. But then the other side of me was thinking, oh my God, this could be an alien abduction. I don't want that.
No, that would not be good. But yeah,
I've had lots of experiences. I haven't had any near-death experiences. I mean, I had almost everything else, I guess, telepathy, OBE, psychic dreams. I've had a dark retreat experience where I had a mask on and I saw this bright shining light, and I thought, oh my God, I messed up and I took off my mask, but I went and felt it. So, oh, the mask's still on. Well, how can I see this light when
You
my
were
eyes are
seeing through
covered?
your, like your third
Yeah,
eye or your non-physical eye
yeah,
or something. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, feel free to share any of those experiences if you want. This discussion is a little unique though, because we're just kind of having metaphysical musings and discussing some of these topics and the evidence that you've come across over your decades of research. So it's a little bit different than what I'm used to doing. So yeah, I mean, do you want to get into some of, the evidence that you've come across?
I would love to. Well, so basically my website is positing that like all existence is analogous to varying levels of like a dream of awareness and consciousness. I guess you could liken it to like a virtual reality or game,
Sure.
like a reality show. It's a cosmic play or a divine drama, which we are the characters, right? And so
Yeah.
the plot line and story arc is deep, and it has heroes and villains, and there's conflict and drama and surprise twists along the way, just like any good movie has to have. So to that end, I'm exploring like whether the tunnel and white light that's reported by so many people at death, near death experiences, and whether it is a trick, or maybe it's not the best option we have, and that souls that maybe go to the white light are, I was looking at all this different stuff, and some of it kind of makes me believe that they're being like processed or recycled and then sent back to Earth, reincarnating.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, they're being like, their energy is being harvested or farmed for these like astral parasites. They're mental and energetic parasites. And I know it sounds scary and stuff, but there's quite a bit of evidence out there that at least we should at least take it, consider it, right?
So the tunnel and the white light, both of those, which are, I guess, kind of common in a lot of the near-death experiences, not all, but so the tunnel and the white light could be sort of luring us into something that we don't, but we're attracted to
Right.
it. Or
And I'll touch on it. Like, I want to go through like a bunch of different areas of research, and one of them is science. And in that end, there's a lot of creatures here on Earth that actually do use light as a lure for their prey.
true, right?
And so these beings in the light that we were talking about, they like have this ability to shapeshift into any form. They can take any form they want, as does any spirit.
Yep.
And so they could pose as angels, archangels, ascended masters, spirit guides, counselors, and maybe even aliens.
Yep.
And so when I look at all the books I've read on this stuff, there's these counselors that repeatedly convince us that we need to return to Earth in order to learn and grow spiritually, right? But it's these near-death experiences that I find completely fascinating. I think have the best evidence to study for. Because some of them have veridical evidence where they could like hear a conversation that doctors were having in a different room, and the doctors are like, "Wait a minute, how could you know that? It's impossible." Or they see a tennis shoe out on the ledge of the building, and it's just, how do they know that?
They can verify it later. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah.
Sorry.
So like every area of research that I investigate basically corroborates this soul trap theory, I guess. And so these areas would be science, religion, politics, mythology, paranormal areas, so-called, such as like near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, pre-birth memories, remote viewing, ghosts, psychedelics, alien abductions. And it basically permeates virtually everything that goes into our subconscious minds and helps to formulate like our everyday worldview of reality. So you got language and stuff in pop culture like Hollywood movies and music, and we can touch on briefly on each of these areas if you want to like give just an overview.
It's a lot of areas.
Yeah, it is.
Sounds saturated with this idea or this concept. Okay, sure. I did have a couple questions, but I think I'll wait and then as we go through.
Okay, yeah, and feel free to jump in and stop me anytime, and I'll kind of like pause in between sections if you want to just insert a comment or question or something. But okay, so science, like first of all, like in ecology, like we have this ecosystem or this food chain where all creatures, must feed off each other for this energy sustenance, right?
Yeah.
And so, humans, we've developed gardening and farming, to help streamline the process, right? And so we think that we're at the top of the food chain, right, humans? But
Right.
we don't think very often about all the parasites and viruses and stuff we have within us, first of
True.
all, that are feeding
Right.
off of us. Like there's scientific articles that talk about how we have parasites in our gut that can send signals via like the vagus nerve and influence our thoughts and moods, and almost like a form of mind control almost. And so it could be the case that there are entities even beyond our perception that are feeding off of us in one form or another.
Okay.
So it's like we have this visible light.
Yeah.
You have like an electromagnetic. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just that phrase "as above, so below" came to mind. Like, how we're a copy of what's above. That's even in scripture. We're a copy of the heavenly abode. And
yeah, it's a hermeticism. It's an axiom in that hermetic teachings that as above, so below. And I think that's what I'm saying. It's like we think, because here on Earth we've got rulers that are authorities that are like telling us what to do, and they may not have our best interests at heart. And everything here is kind of like dog eat dog. It's not an easy place to be. And but we think that magically when we die, all of a sudden we're just going to go to this heaven or paradise.
Yes,
and
yes.
I mean, and here's the thing: if these counselors and guides are helping us plan our next life, which the texts do say, you see it repeatedly in all these different things, then they know what's going on, right? So, but and then we have all these life reviews when we go back after we die, and they're seeing it all. Then it just seems like there's a disconnect there, and that they're content maybe with it, or they're not. I don't know. They're really not sending people back and telling them what to do to change all that. They're like, oh, you got to go back and.
Do you have an opinion as to if these counselors are deceptive or deceived themselves and just think this is the way it's done?
Yeah, I'll get to a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be a little of both. Like it may be sort of part of they're playing God, maybe in a sense that it's part of the game, is that we grow as souls and we live these lives and we go back, and so they try to tell us what we did wrong, so they want to send us back to another life so we can learn again. But I think ultimately, well, I guess I'll share it. Like everything I think is duality here in this world, and there's like a polarity. You got a positive pole and a negative pole, and energy is oscillating between the two, like waveforms. And so for every positive, there has to be like a corresponding negative. Like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction kind of thing in science. And so in order for these beings to stay in this very positive, they say everything's like super loving up there and everything's positive. There's no hate, there's no war, there's no none of that stuff. So in order for there to be that, for them to hang out in that positive pole, maybe there needs to be beings that are in a corresponding negative pole. So I think it may be, there's farmers and pet owners here that aren't that kind to their animals, and but there's some good ones, loving ones. And so I look at the angels and guides and people like that. Like some of them are caring about us, and then others just don't really. And so they may have like a selfish motive of sending us down. I mean, because they send us down, they say, well, you've got an unfulfilled mission, you have to go back. But they very rarely ever tell us what that mission is. Right. So I don't know. That's kind of one of the things I've thought about. I don't know if that's the case or not, but there's a lot of deception and where they pose as the Virgin Mary, and then it wasn't until like the person asked, are you really the Virgin Mary, that they show their true form. So yeah, but I'll get into some of that stuff later, I guess.
Yeah, I have interviewed people who the entities will disguise themselves, ETs or humans. Actually, I've heard of human spirits manifesting as ETs to impress the person that they're trying to connect with.
There's at least 2 or 3 dozen NDEs that have aliens that I've found. And one in particular was one by a woman named Ruth. And she said that they took her to this council of grays that they said they were in charge of the recycling of souls. And so yeah, I'll get into that later. But all of these are like up on the nderf.org website. It's a Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. And they've got over 4,000 near-death experiences cataloged up there, and anybody can go in and if
Okay.
they've had a near-death experience and add there. So it's very much, it's not like something I created or anything. It's like a third-party source.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there's more than what meets the eye here on Earth, because there's this electromagnetic spectrum, and the visible light spectrum is just this tiny little sliver. I forget, it's like 1/10 billionth or something of what's out there, because you got,
Wow.
you know, X-rays, gamma rays, just
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff, and all this dark energy and dark matter that's like 90%, 96% of the universe, they say. So there's lots of stuff that we don't know about. And there,
True,
like,
true.
there's this hypnotherapist, Dr. Edith Fiore. She wrote this book called The Unquiet Dead, and were these clients that they were found that there was entities that were possessing them, and, you know, vamping energy from them. And there's I know, like, when when my parents put her in the hospice, and one of the nurses, she had been there for 40 years, and I asked her if she ever saw these light orbs that would come, and she's, oh yeah, they come and go all the time. Then I asked her if she ever saw these like shadow beings or dark entities, and she just nodded her head like, yeah, but she
Yep.
didn't seem to want to talk about that, you know.
Really
So
common. The orbs, the shadow beings. Yeah, I've heard a lot about
yeah, and even in
that.
Christian literature, you have the concept of demons, you know, that maybe are like
Yep.
stealing souls or stealing energy, and there's the jinn.
Mhm.
Almost every culture has that kind of idea. Because I mean, I've talked to a friend that like saw this shadow being leaning over his son's ear and like whispering into his
Oh
ear
my
at night.
gosh.
So, and I've
Oh,
I've
that's
seen
horrible.
photos of these things too.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Yeah,
so,
and I'm sorry, you were talking about the science end of things, and I kind of switched gears. So I don't want, if you want to go back and finish, I didn't know if you finished up.
yeah, sure, thanks.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. So, like, you know, even here on Earth, that light can be used. Like, we use these what are called bug zappers. They're actually
Yeah,
called they're actually called light traps. But you
like,
like hang
yeah.
them up, and, you know, the bug goes in and gets zapped. And then there's fishermen. I didn't know this until recently because I'm not a fisherman, but they use lights to lure the smaller fish up to the surface so that they can
Yeah.
catch them. And then there's this fish that, you know, in the movie Finding Nemo, it's called the angler fish, and it like dangles this light down. There's these bioluminescent fish that are very deep, like 90% of them are bioluminescent, and it dangles this light out as a lure to capture its prey. But there's, you know, at least like a dozen of those type of creatures here on Earth. There's viperfish, dragonfish. There's a cuttlefish that has this like hypnotic glow. It changes all these colors and hypnotizes prey. There's these like larvae gnats that they put stuff up on the caverns, like I think it's in New Zealand, but like the prey, they look up and it looks like a starry lit night or something like that, and they go flying up and they get stuck in the stickiness of it. So there's spider. I mean, there's just all kinds of different fish and animals that use that to trap their prey. So there is a precedence for it here on Earth.
Yeah.
There's creatures that use like there's, I think, a type of firefly, and she like mimics other fireflies, like the mating pattern. So she lures in like males or whatever with her hypnotic changing of light patterns, and then she basically eats them. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, it's going to continue on with like science. There's the idea of this that this being a simulation, or like there's like a holographic model. And, you know, scientists are writing articles and books about, you know, how it could be a simulation. And
Yeah.
you know, there's certain businessmen that are creating virtual worlds as we speak. And so, like, how do we know that ancient civilizations or alien civilizations haven't already created a virtual reality like that, and that we're not in one of them right
Oh,
now?
geez.
One of the scientists highly regarded is Max Planck. He's the like originator of quantum theory. And in 1931, he said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. So even these scientists are saying that consciousness is the basis of reality and not this like physical matter that we, you know. And then these like modern philosophers like Chalmers and Kastrup and Donald Hoffman, they're coming to the same conclusion, that conscious awareness is like fundamental. And then you've got David Bohm, who was talking about the holographic universe. He's a quantum physicist. And then another one, Seth Lloyd, wrote this book called Programming the Universe. And he says that the universe is like one big quantum computer, which is producing everything around us. There's just a lot of scientists, John Wheeler, Richard Feynman, Nick Bostrom gave forth like the simulation argument, and his paper was like, "Are you living in a computer simulation?" There was the Isaac Asimov conference. Isaac Asimov was this famous science fiction writer, right? And so every year they have this conference, and in 2016, the topic was, "Is the universe a simulation?" And there was this 6-part series that PBS produced, and it was called The Brain with David Eagleman. And he was talking about like how everything is this internally generated reality, and that the world is actually inside our brain and is constantly updated by information from our senses, but what we experience isn't what's really out there. I mean, it's just, he says it's a beautifully rendered simulation. So like we got these electrical signals in our brain, you know, translates it into what we see. And like, I think the world is like really upside down, inverted on our retina. It's like so much stuff that we don't really, reality is not what we really think it is all I'm saying. So like Albert Einstein said, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. So, you know, there is a precedent for thinking that this is kind of an illusion or dream. There's another scientist, Fred Alan Wolf, who wrote this book called The Dreaming Universe. So energy is like really, like Nikola Tesla, another really important scientist. He said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And he said that black is the true face of light, but we just don't see it. So I don't know, it's just kind of giving you a little idea of what some of the science is out there that kind of supports a lot of. So yeah, and so I guess even like mythology, you go back and look at some of the ancient cultures and what they wrote or believed, and they talked about these demigods, right? These titans. They were half god, half man, but there was all these sacrifices that they would give to the gods, you know. You know, there's Norse gods, you know, like Thor and Loki, and the Egyptian gods, Ra, Osiris, Isis, all them. And then of course there's like the Mesopotamian ones, like Maya, Incan, Aztecs, and they sacrificed, you know, all these humans atop the pyramids.
Right.
Like to the sun. They wanted to keep, you know, the crops replenished and all that stuff.
Where did that come from? The idea of sacrificing humans or children or whatever to the gods to appease them.
Gods probably told them that. I mean, whether the shamans, they journeyed to the afterlife or to the other world. And I don't know, I have that same question, but I suspect that they got that information from the god somehow told them that he needed that. I don't know. So
I mean, it's even in the Bible, you know, sacrifice.
Yeah, and in the Gnostic text, they in the Gospel of Thomas, it says that God is a man eater. Yeah.
It's interesting. Okay. Do you know what context that was in? God is a man. Was it in relation to sacrifice or?
I don't know.
Gee, okay.
It's been a while since I looked at that particular
That's
quote.
not a very good thing. Okay.
No, it's not. But I mean, it fits right in with like the sacrifices. And you go back to the very early civilization of Sumer and the Sumerian tablets, and you know, accordingly, they created mankind for to give them praise and to give them sacrifices and to basically, I don't know, what also to do their labors, like kind of like the book of Genesis and the Judeo-Christian Bible, where, you know, we were placed in the garden to work. Or
to be servants.
Exactly. So it's kind of along those lines. And the Sumerian texts actually go through the process where, you know, they name the gods, and Enki was like the genetic engineer, and he told his like mom Nama that, you know, all the gods were like revolting, like the work was too hard, and so Enki had this idea that he would take the primitive creature that was here on Earth, and they would combine their DNA with it in the lab and produce this creature that could take orders and do what they needed. And so one day I went to Barnes and Nobles, and I went to the mythology section because I wanted to look at some of this mythology. And there was a book, there's only one I found, and it was called, it was by this woman named Jules Cashford, and it was called The Moon, Myth and Image. And I'm looking at it, and it's got sections like the moon as the dealer of death, the moon as the abode of souls, the moon as a stage in the journey to the sun. And like, so my idea was that the moon and the sun, like we would go to the moon and sun after death. Like we're kind of programmed subconsciously to do that. I don't feel like it's that way anymore. I don't feel we're subconsciously programmed, but I think that the moon and sun are involved. Like I'll get into the moon later, but
I've heard of NDEs. They go into the sun often. It's a bright light like the sun. I feel like I'm looking into the sun. I've heard that one a lot.
Yeah, so this book had like dozens and dozens of myths from all these different cultures that believed souls went to the moon and sun at death, and they were thought of boats that carried souls after death, and in some instances were food for the moon, and then they like deliver them to the sun. I mean, this is like somebody else has already done the research and saying exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And like in some shamanic lore, that the moon steals souls, and it's the shamans task the journey to the moon and bring them back. But I mean, the moon's always been a really mysterious object. It has quite a few anomalies. Like there's the backside or the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
And it's, it's just because it rotates just slow enough that the same side always faces Earth. I mean, that's a little, they call it tidal locking, and it's supposedly it's in synchronous rotation, but I mean, it's very, very interesting, suspicious. It would make like the perfect alien outpost, right? So, and then you got the total eclipse, where it's just a coincidence that the moon's diameter is about 380 times smaller than the sun's, yet it's 380 times closer to the Earth. So that just perfectly pretty much blocks out the sun during a solar eclipse.
Okay.
So that could help, certain people cover stuff up if there was something nefarious going on.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and so the sun obviously was worshipped as God by many cultures.
Yep.
It's the moon too, and you have some interesting word associations like sun and sun. Like when you have a male offspring, you call it the sun, and then you have a soul, like your soul. But also the scientific name for the sun is soul, SOL. And if something's SOL, it's like if somebody's SOL, it's like you're out of luck, right? Shit out of luck. And then you got these soldiers or soul dyers. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into that kind of stuff, but like in Olympic Games, it starts out with this like ritual. I mean, these are the World Games, right? The World Olympic Games, and it starts out with this ritual where like a human torch relay, and it's lit by the rays of the sun in a cauldron. Its official name is, they call it a cauldron, and the sun's fire is like kept alive by these runners running in a human relay. So, I don't know, the symbolism there is not lost on me. But so anyway, like back to the moon, like in Wicca, there's all these spells associated with the moon and the drawing down of the moon, and just the names and titles of these moon gods and goddesses from these different cultures are really interesting. So like you have Thoth, he was the trickster god and the god of thieves, the transporter of souls and conductor of spirits. And then you have the moon goddess Diana, was the goddess of the hunt, probably because the moon lights at night, you can still harvest your crops and stuff like that. But I mean, and Aphrodite was the goddess of love and desire. Isis is the mistress of magic, the queen of sorcery, and lady of the spell. Hecate is the goddess of witchcraft. Lilith is the patroness of witches and the queen of demons. And of course, like we're all familiar with this idea of being born in sin and saved by the sun, right? Well, Sin was the Mesopotamian god of the moon. and just interesting how that stuff gets passed down from culture to culture, and
interesting connections here.
Yeah, so like back to the Sumerian tablets, like I was talking about, that they have this tablet that says, like heaven itself, your just matrix, in which gods too can be born, is beyond reach. So they're like talking about, they're mentioning this being a matrix, or the heaven being like a matrix or part of it. And so, yeah, I already mentioned about how they created mankind and to give them sacrifice and praises. And so the texts refer to Enki as the supreme dragon. And Anna, or she's Venus, basically, she was called the Queen of Heaven. And but this other being, Ningal or Nungal, I think is the same epithet for Inanna. She had a prison or a jail. It was her beloved dwelling with awesome radiance, and its gate in the yellow evening light exudes radiance. And when an individual is brought in, he cannot resist its aura. So, some interesting stuff. And then like the Gnostics, I find the Gnostics really fascinating. They're like contemporaries of Christianity. and but they were basically declared heretics, and
Right.
a lot of them were killed, and their books were burned, and because they said that the God of the Bible was a false God and not the real one. So they had this idea that the
Okay.
real true heaven was a copy, and basically like a matrix kind of scenario, and that this being was posing as God, but he really wasn't God. And they just talked about all this stuff like it's a likeness of heaven. There's these things they call ionic copies, and a product resembling the primeval light. But they said that this being, this false God, was without spirit. And so it kind of makes me think perhaps it's like an AI or half AI, and that it's stealing. The texts are literally saying that it's stealing the light, taking the light power from the true spirits and gathering it. And there's like a treasury of light, and there's what they call receivers of the moon and receivers of the sun, and they take the light power energy and they refine it. There's Melchizedek, he's the purifier of the light, and he refines it, and then they send souls back down to earth in the form of the men and fish and animals and stuff. So all that stuff is like right in the Gnostic text. I mean, I didn't even know it until I was researching it. It's interesting.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't know a whole lot about the Gnostics, just a smidgen. So they're saying that the God of the Bible, the Hebrew, Jewish, Christian Bible, that God is a copy or a fake of the true God.
Yeah. So they have this idea that there's the paroma, which is the fullness or completeness. That's like they call it the eternal light realms, and that's like the true heaven and where the true God basically is. And
Okay.
that there was this goddess Sophia. She was the goddess of wisdom, and I think she wanted to create, and she didn't do it with the mixed, like you got male and female energies, right? And so she did it without the male counterpart, and it created something that was probably it was kind of an anomaly or an error. It wasn't complete, I guess you could say. And so out of that creation, this demiurge was born, and it's like her son, and he found himself alone, and he assumed he was God, right? And so when she came down to tell him that he wasn't God, he got angry and jealous, and out of that anger, these like archons, which means rulers or authorities, they were kind of like maybe shadow being, they were just manifested out of his anger.
Okay.
I mean, there's different texts that have slightly different variations on what happened. Some say she wanted to go to a higher station, and so it was out of her desire that a lot of this. Unfortunately, women get blamed for a lot of stuff, whether it's Pandora or Eve or any of this stuff.
I guess.
It's not really fair, but yeah. So that's kind of the gist on the Gnostics.
Okay.
So yeah, and then even in Hinduism and Buddhism, you've got this idea of reincarnation, and that the soul has to keep coming back
Yeah.
countless times until they clear their karma or balance their karma. The goal obviously is being like liberation, and like even the Tibetan Book of the Dead says to go to the clear light, not the white light. And so, so I have a lot of trust and or a lot of credence in what like these monks. They're like spending so much time meditating, right, going within themselves, and I'm assume like out of their body and communicating. And so I feel like they should be taken seriously with what they're saying. A lot of so yeah, if we look at it like these OBEs, I'm going to go on to the next topic because I got so much.
I wish I could
cover in an
go
hour.
inward and get some more questions answered, but that's another thing.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So like a couple of the big ones, Robert Monroe was the first one I came across.
Yes.
I consider him like one of the pioneers, and he wrote several books, but he talked about this concept called louche. Well, in one of his lectures on YouTube, he talked about this being that was kind of like a demiurge that was kind of controlled Earth, like who came and who went, and he called him the entry director. So even he was talking about that kind of concept, but he talked about this idea of louche, where this energy is kind of being taken by these other beings, and they're using it kind of like a energy source, I guess you could say. But he said the most prized form is love. And he also talked about this dream emitter out there. that was like emitting the dream. So as I'm saying, this is like different levels of dream. Like
Oh,
even
yeah.
even he in his out of body experiences found the same thing. William Gilman's another one. He's written quite a few books, and I like him because he surveyed like over 15,000 out of body experiencers, right? So he's really knowledgeable. And he said he's not going to go to the light either, and that the afterlife is a consensus reality construct. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Interesting. Yeah, both of them. I read their books, and yeah, the Loosh thing threw me off when I read that part.
yeah,
It is like,
yeah.
what the heck
And
is
even
this?
like Vardankar is an offshoot of Eckankar. Eckankar talks a lot about
Oh,
soul
yeah.
travel. It's like a big
Yep.
thing. And there was an offshoot of it called Vardankar. And when I was reading up about that, there was a lot of similarities to some of the stuff I was talking about. So, and then you have remote viewing, which is somewhere
Yeah.
along the same lines. But
Right.
a couple like Courtney Brown, and he has this Farsight Institute. He's one of the more well-known remote viewers.
Yeah.
And he's been saying now that the white light's a trap too. And this other guy, Brett Stewart, is had this lecture on moksha and liberation, and he was saying the white light's a trap too. So, or I hope I'm saying that right. I mean, it's very similar to that. I don't want to like put words in people's mouths, but
there's a lot of
espousing ideas very, very similar, if not exact. So then you have psychedelics. Do you have a question?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So like then psychedelics, like people who take psychedelics, especially like DMT or ayahuasca, mushrooms and stuff like that, sativa, they report seeing these entities, and that well, it's not everyone, but a lot of them, these entities are like feeding off their energy, and they see these grids and geometric patterns. And the DMT smokers, like they report a tunnel and what's called a breakthrough into like the other side. And over there, they see like all these entities like aliens, clowns, tricksters, jesters, machine elves, religious deities, and you know, tricksters and clowns. I mean, that's a little bit of a wait, what?
I've seen a few clowns
insects
in my out of body experiences.
And so, like the next subject, because I just got to cover so much, you know, and UFOs and aliens.
And
right?
we'll go into maybe we can have you back and we'll go into each of these a little more in depth. But
yeah, I'd love to do that. So yeah, like research into UFOs and alien abductions, they talk about the similarities to the abductions and the white light of the near-death experiences. In fact, the IONS co-founder, one of them, IONS is the International Association for Near-Death Studies, right? And his name's Kenneth Ring. He even wrote a book about it and mentioned it in his interview with Larry King. But you know, these abductees have talked about being taken into a light. You know, people like Betty Andreessen and Truman Cash, and there's another book called Watchers 2 by Raymond Fowler, and he's talking about the different commonalities of the UFO experience and the NDE experience. There's some of the researchers like Dr. Carla Turner. Before she died, she said in this lecture that the most important information she could convey is that the aliens are not to be trusted based on their interactions and all their promises with abductees and everything. And then I think so many, there's Linda Moulton Howe, she's done a lot of research into it, but like my favorite would be David Jacobs. And I think he's conducted like 70,000 regressions or something. I mean, he's getting up there in his years, and he's been doing it probably like for at least decades, right? And so he's written several books like The Secret Life and The Threat, but he talks about these mind scans that the aliens do and how they can erase the memory. And then they use by these false screen memory implants to like cover up the real memory. Like they'll put like an image of a deer or an owl or something like that.
I heard there's 3 types of screen memories, but that's
And so he wrote, his latest book is called Walking Among Us, the Alien Plan to Control Humanity. And so he says that these aliens, they got this hybridization program, right? And he said there's already these hybrids that are living among us based on all these regressions he's doing. And he calls them hybrids. But yeah, so it's pretty interesting, some of the stuff that he's found.
ET stuff's a little scary, but
yeah. And so I found like a couple dozen, 2 or 3 dozen NDEs that mentioned seeing aliens during the NDE. And I mentioned the one with Ruth, where she said she was taken to this council of Greys that were in charge of recycling souls. Another one, James N., he saw these Greys around the throne in the white light. And there was this worm that was pulling levers and sending souls back to Earth and telling them to be a better man. And then this other one that said the Virgin Mary appeared to him. He said it wasn't until I asked her, "Are you really the Virgin Mary?" that it showed its real true identity. And he was like, "What's going on here?" He was like really scared about it. And so it seems like these beings, they say they do it to make us feel more comfortable with our
Yep,
transition.
I've heard that.
But I mean, they're obviously being somewhat deceptive and perhaps even manipulative. Like if they're not showing their true form to us, I mean, what the
Right.
heck? I mean, how much can we trust everything that's going on? But so then you have this idea that these life reviews are being shown to them, and it's disconcerting when these guides and counselors are the ones, like they're convincing people that they need to go back and reincarnate on Earth in order to learn and grow. But there's kind of some problems in my mind with all that, because they say everything's perfect over there and it's all love, and a lot of them say, well, you know, anything you want to know, you just think about it and it's instantaneous. So like, what's the point of coming back here? And the thing is, all this suffering that's going on, and life after life after life, and some people are having thousands of lives, for thousands of years. And it's like, here's the thing they say over there, like you interviewed John Davis, and John Davis was talking about these different buildings over there where you could go down and see that life, you could be immersed within the light, I mean, within the experience here on Earth. And that and people say that this white light is like a collective soul comprised of like billions and billions, like all of humanity. And so if you can share these experiences, we're pulling all the information together and sharing the experiences. So why do we need, and we got 8 billion people right here on the planet just right now, why do we need billions and billions and billions of souls living thousands and thousands and thousands of lives when we can share the experience of something so simple as love? And
sure, yeah,
it just seems like there would be a better system than a system that's designed to it's almost like we're being sabotaged. Like we don't have a lot of good role models here. Wouldn't you want a system where there's a lot of people that are great role models, and you learn from being around people that are all love, and instead of, we're in the dark, we're confused. I mean, all that stuff is like a form of gaslighting. They call it gaslighting, where you're presented with a different reality than what it is. And so they use tactics like confusing you and keeping you in the dark about things and lying. So I don't know. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying it's enough red flags that make me look at other alternatives.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when people, even people with pre-birth memories that say they remember being tricked or persuaded or forced to come to Earth.
Yeah.
And I think at least half the near-death experiences were sent back like against their will. I mean, they're kind of persuaded, like if they can't talk them in, they give them the choice. I'm not saying this is the same for everyone, because near-death experiences are all unique and subjective. And so I'm not saying it's a one-size-fits-all. I'm just saying that some of them are given the choice whether they want to go back. And we never hear from the ones that chose to stay. Right. So the ones that chose, sometimes they'll choose to come back. Well, that makes it easy. If they don't want to come back, a lot of times they'll show them, well, here's what happens if you don't go back. Your husband's becoming an alcoholic and all these bad things are going to happen. So then they'd say, okay, yeah, I'll go back. I think I need to go back. And then other times, like half of them, I think, are just like literally forced back against their will. I mean, they don't want to go. It's such a beautiful place over there.
That's true. I mean, I've heard and I've interviewed all of those different types of experience.
Right. Yeah. So I just found this article recently. It's in the near-death studies journal of near-death studies, and it's by Raymond Lee, and it's called The Reimagination of Death. And he talks about dream yoga, near-death, and clear light. And this clear light that the Tibetan Buddhists talk about, it's not a color of light. It doesn't have, it's more like an awareness, like an awakeness, awareness, aliveness. That's like the clear sky. It's like clarity. It's not like a light. But he was talking about in this article about like some of these, like the near-death experiencers may have, they're not like avid dream yogas, right? The people that like in their dreams are like trying to, they practice and they're learning and they reach what they call this state of clear light. And he said they're not adepts at that. So they are going into the initial stages of what they call samsara or illusion, where these beings and deities show up. And there's different series, according to the Tibetans, there's different series of lights that happen in the bardo, or the between life stages. And so I just thought that was interesting that even in the near-death studies journal, they were talking about that. And Yeah, and so then like you got these past life regressions, life between lives, pre-birth memories, and I've looked at all these books. I've got so many books on all that stuff. And like there's a book, You've Been Here Before by Edith Fiore. I don't find as much stuff in the past life books because there's not as many books written on that, I don't think. But like I really like the life between lives type books where you know, you have Michael Newton who wrote Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. He's a hypnotherapist that took his clients in between lives. He kind of accidentally stumbled onto it, like and then Dolores Cannon is another one who wrote a book
Yeah.
called Conversations with the Spirit Between Life and Death. And their findings were very, very similar. Like, and then so Michael, in Dolores Cannon's book, there was one of her clients was talking about this supercomputer that's on the other side. And it's like this algorithm that helps calculate or tabulate like what your next life and stuff should be. But Dolores Cannon wasn't able to go back into this room. It was guarded by like the guardians or something. And then Michael Newton, and in his books, you know, first of all, he's like talking about all these pods and clusters, and at one point he's like telling, like one of his clients was like his grandpa Joe or somebody came to greet him and take him over, and then his grandpa Joe like leaves and he's like, wait, where are you going, and all this stuff. He's starting to get scared, and like, and Michael Newton at one point he goes, this sounds like indoctrination. He's like, no, it's not indoctrination. He got real defensive. It's not indoctrination. But even Michael Newton was like questioning about it because it sounded a little suspicious to him. And even in his books, like there's technology on the other side, like flat screen TVs. Like John Davis in your interview was talking about these flat screen TVs that were over there, and all this marble cities, marble columns, marble
all
benches,
the time.
and marble contains crystal. They talk about these crystal cities, and here like crystal is a high advanced form of technology, where like, you know, you have quartz crystal for watches, and you've got computer drives, you know, you get these chips, computer chips that use silicone and all this stuff. So crystals are used as like transducer receivers, right? For it's just interesting to me. And then this book Cosmic Cradle is all about pre-birth memories, and I bought that and was looking through it, and there's like all these counselors that are assisting us with our life plans. And I remember one in particular, and the counselor's going, well, what kind of injury do you want to have? It's like, injury? I don't want any kind of injury. And the counselor's like, well, yeah, you know, you learn more from the injury. And so like the person finally said, okay, I'll have a hand injury. And the counselor's just like, like, you know, the counselor, I guess, wanted her to be like decapacitated or immobilized or something. It's like more suffering.
I have interviewed someone with pre-birth memories, and he was encouraged to have more suffering to retain more memories of his pre-birth. Like he had to suffer more, a little bit more in his life so he could have some memories. Like, what is this? This is a little weird.
Yeah. So like, and why the need for like this mind wipe where you're sent down to earth, you don't remember anything, right? Like if you go to school here on earth and you enroll in a class, and you know when you're in the class that, yeah, I signed up for it and I want to learn this particular subject, right?
Right.
But here it's like, nope.
We sign up for it, we want to learn it, and then it's gone.
Yeah, and they say, well, you know, because if you remembered everything, you would hold grudges against somebody that harmed you in a past life and all this other stuff. And it's like, well, then are you really learning?
Yeah, good point.
I mean, I don't know. It's like, yeah, it just makes me question a lot of that stuff.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, so like, why can't we remember just, you know, I understand that like, there's all this information, we can't squeeze it into this little body, right? It's just, so they got like this regulator that helps in chakras and all this stuff that like steps down the energy, but you think you can remember that one thing? It's just one piece of data, right? It's like, I remember coming down here.
I agree. A couple little things is not going to hurt my brain from past lives or whatever, pre-birth, what the afterlife. It doesn't make sense to me that we have zero memories.
Yeah,
there's something suspicious.
Yeah, I'm just saying that
I feel, but
enough that makes me want to question, like, according to John, there's millions of other planets that are way better than Earth. Like this is the hardest one or the worst one.
Yeah,
and it's
John
like,
Davis.
Yeah, so like some of those planets, they're just almost like all positive seemingly. At least we don't have the disease and war and all the stuff we have here.
Apparently you can learn and experience and even have contrast, sounds like, on all these other planets without extreme suffering. That's one of my main issues that I can't seem to reconcile.
Yeah, it's almost like as if they say, well, you can take the fast track and go to Earth and you can learn way much more quicker. And
Fast
it's like,
track,
I
how
mean, why are we in such a
1,000
hurry? We
lives?
got eternity anyway, right? Why not just
But
take
how
the,
is this a fast track? I've interviewed people, they say they've had 1,200, 2,000
yeah,
lives.
it's not much of
So
a
how's
fast
that a
track.
fast? I don't. Anyway,
Yeah, no, I don't buy it myself personally, but I could be wrong. I'm not like saying I know everything or that I'm right. But I don't know how we are on time, but I mean, I could like go over like some stuff like movies and music, but I mean, if we're near the hour, then
we're
we
an
can kind of
hour,
wrap it up.
but what do you want to do? Do you want to do a
It's
little
up to
bit
you.
more, or do you want to save it for later?
I don't know. I'll just leave it up to you. I don't know how convincing or how cogent of an argument like I've put forward, the evidence. If,
It's a lot of
yeah.
evidence, and you're just giving little tastes of things that we can get into. But yeah, if you want it just a little bit,
I
maybe.
mean,
Is that
just
okay?
a little bit, because
Yeah.
I think people that are producing movies and producing music, I mean, music comes from the word muse, right? I mean, these goddesses or whatever, they were like inspiring men to do these creative works. So they're getting inspired from messages from the other side, right?
Mhm.
And then you have a lot of these people are into occult practices, or they're into
Yeah.
alcohol and drugs. Like Ozzy Osbourne had this song called "The Demon Alcohol," and they make the alcohol
Mhm.
makes them do the zombie stomp and all this kind of stuff. So if they're under
Mhm.
the influence of that kind of stuff, but like just quickly with the movies, like you've got the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and that acronym is NATAS, which is Satan backwards. And this is the academy that presents the Emmy Awards. Okay, this just isn't some little
Huh.
rinky-dink operation. They present the Emmy Awards, which are these statuettes of the muse of art, and she's holding up an atom of science. I mean, I took that straight from their website. She's the muse of art, and she's holding up this atom of science. And then you have the Oscar statue, which is this knight, and he's holding a sword, and it looks like the Egyptian god of the dead, Os or Osiris.
Mm.
And then one of my favorite guys who unfortunately passed away recently, Jordan Maxwell, he said the name Hollywood came from the magic wand of the Druids, and that were made of holly wood.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
you still see like the magic of Hollywood being, done today. But and then they got all these terms like set and pan and programs and a cast. But
Yeah.
then like one of the logos, like you've seen DreamWorks pictures, right? In the very beginning, they got this logo of a boy, and he's on the moon and he's fishing,
Mhm.
and on into Earth below. It's like, okay,
Mm.
what are they
What is?
fishing
Yeah, that's
for?
interesting.
And there's this ad by Miller, and it was called Miller Reel in the High Life. When it had a siren or a woman with a witch's hat, she's sitting on the moon, and the thing's literally saying "Reel in the high life." And of course,
Hmm.
you got Starbucks with the siren motif, where the
Oh yeah.
logo it's like originally was this siren with spread legs and everything. And the sirens in Greek mythology were the
Hmm.
ones that lured the sailors to their
Huh.
deaths on the rocks with their sweet singing. They were like basically seducing them. And then there was this commercial by Mountain Dew. It was called Live Wire, and it was drawing a parallel between humans and bug zappers. And these humans were like, I wonder if they've ever seen these bugs flying to the zapper and getting zapped. And it's like, I wonder why they do that. I was like, that's so stupid. Why do they do that? And all of a sudden, there's this orange glowing container of all this live wire drink, and they start being hypnotized, and they walk towards the orange light, and they like bump into it. And it's like live wire. See what the attraction is all about. So they're putting a lot of this stuff out there.
Hmm.
In movies. I mean, it's almost a meme. It's like a cliche now about, jokes about, don't go to the light or go to the light.
Hmm.
It's just everywhere. And then there was that movie A Bug's Life, where there's a bug going towards the
Oh
zapper,
yeah.
and he's like, don't go to the light. It's like, I can't help it. It's so
Oh yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. I remember.
And in
Yeah.
Finding Nemo, I mentioned Finding Nemo
Yeah.
with the angler drop, and they like literally drew a parallel between their consciousness and being dead. Like Dory said, like the other one was like, I'm your conscious or something like that. It's like, am I
Oh
dead?
yeah.
And
That's
then they're
right.
like in the dark, and they're like literally saying, am I dead? And then this light comes and like wants to
Huh.
devour him,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so of course the movie The Matrix, where like
Oh
there's
yeah.
these
My
AI
favorite.
machines that are using human energy as a battery source. And
Yeah.
the Truman Show with Jim Carrey, where he's like living in a reality TV show and everybody around him
Yeah,
is
that
basically
was
lying
a
to
good
him
one.
about his reality. And then the Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek is this huge, thing. And they had this. Their very pilot episode featured these telepathic aliens that he'd captured the captain and it had him within this force field of a cage or this menagerie. It was like sort of a theater for them where they were feeding off kind of their emotions and that. And then this other episode of Voyager, Coda, which is Star Trek, and it actually theorized that NDEs might be aliens deceiving souls with this light matrix of energy that nourishes them.
Oh,
Like Captain Janeway dies and this alien being pretends to be her father, like shapeshifts and takes on the form of her father. But
uh-huh.
she realizes that something's not right because her father would never be that pushy about coming into his light. Is this big glowing light behind him? And so
Interesting.
she
Ooh.
basically says, "Go back to hell, coward." And then afterwards, like the crew members are saying, "You think that all near-death experiences might be like that?" It's just like, wow. And then you have Monsters Inc., where these monsters, are
Oh,
basically
yeah.
harnessing the energy from the screams of children
Yeah.
to power their world, right? To power their universe.
Yeah. I love
And
that. I
then
watched that several times with my kids.
finally, the recent Disney Pixar movie Soul, where they showed like this kind of conveyor belt that's going into the white light. And if you listen real closely, you can hear the zapping electrical as the souls are going in. You hear the
Really?
zzz. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't pick up on that.
So yeah, I mean that's just like touching the surface of movies, and of course in music there's a lot of stuff too. But like the Rolling Stones, they have this album called Metamorphosis, and on the cover it shows this group of insect-like aliens, and they're holding masks of the band members up in front of them, like almost saying that they're controlling the band members, like this alien
Mm,
race are controlling them. And why would they put that imagery? I mean, maybe they're trying to, maybe they know something and they're trying to.
they're trying to tell us something.
Maybe. Then you have Sting, who was the lead singer for Police, and he's got an album and a song. It's called Soul Cages. It's talking about swim to the light and all this kind of stuff. It's interesting. Pink Floyd, their first album was called Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and of course the Dark Side of the Moon album, who's like
Mm,
covers this prism of white light coming out of the surrounding void or darkness, and it separates like into the different colors of the rainbow. And the whole album seems to be about life and death. Like it starts with a heartbeat, and then there's
mm-hmm,
this song called "The Great Gig in the Sky," which is obviously alluding to death. I mean, there's even a part where he says, "I'm not afraid to die. Who's afraid to? Why should I be afraid of dying?"
mm-hmm.
And the whole thing's about all that. And then, like more modern, like you've got this band Tool that's pretty popular, and they worked with Alex Gray, and his art is like inspired by DMT trips, and it's
Oh,
very popular within spiritual people and New Age types. And they had the song, Tool has a song called Vicarious, and it talks about how these entities live vicariously through us. And the video is like showing these ticks and leeches and other parasites that are within and without. There's like an octopus kind of up near the moon or something. It's a real trip. So like, why are these bands? What do they know, and what are they trying to tell us? Maybe they're trying to enlighten us.
mm-hmm.
Of course, you got like these classic rock songs. Rock songs are replete with all this kind of stuff. But I mean, especially Stairway to Heaven, obviously, and Hotel California. And both those songs are, maybe top 5 all time. They're just really popular, but they contain many of the same elements. Like there's a lost or confused traveler in both. There's a path or a
Yeah.
road. There's a lady shining a light to show the way.
Yep.
There's heaven or hell.
Mm-hmm.
There's wind. There's a spirit, and there's like a piper or voices that are calling to them.
Hmm.
I'm almost done here. A
I
couple
love
more.
both of those songs.
Yeah, they're awesome. I remember hearing Stairway to Heaven for the first time. It's just,
Love them.
oh my gosh. And then, so you got AC/DC in the song Hell's Bells.
Yep.
And the
I
lyrics
know it.
literally state, "See the white light flashing as I split the night. Nobody's putting up a fight. I got my bell. I'm going to take you to hell. I'm going to get you, Satan, get you, hell's bells." I mean, he's talking about white light. It's
Hmm.
in the night and nobody's putting up a fight. And I'm going to take you to hell.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, and then there's like this other website I found. It's called darklyrics, I think, .com. And it's just these lesser known bands that are like, it's what's called post metal or hardcore doom songs. But there's like songs like White Light Suicide by a group called Witchcraft, a song called
White
Demiurge
light
by,
suicide.
yeah. And there's this songs like called Demiurge by Cult of Sorrow. And then there's this band called Isis, which has a lot of, it's just, we don't have time to get deep into it, but just kind of wanted to show that
touch
even
on it.
that's important, because we go around in our cars and we chant these lyrics over and over and over. It's all going in our subconscious mind, and it helps formulate our beliefs and expectations, which could factor into our afterlife decisions, right?
Wow, I
In the
never
movies,
really
you know,
thought about
if
that.
we create reality with our own consciousness and our own intentions, well,
Yeah.
when millions and millions and millions of people go into a movie theater and they're basically being passive and they're taking in
Right.
all these images, it's almost like programming. They
We're
can get us to
hypnotizing
buy
ourselves.
in
Yeah, we're
to the future or whatever they want that to be. Yeah,
huh.
it's a form of hypnosis. So yeah, that's kind of like just a
Yikes.
real brief overview of a lot of the different things.
That's that's
And
a
like,
lot of material, Wayne.
yeah, and like I went on a Forever Conscious Research channel and did like 30 hours. Like we did a 8 or 9 part series where just for 30 hours I did a deep dive into all this stuff. And this is just like the surface. I mean, you can go in any one of these
Yeah.
areas and just really go deep. And the more
Well,
data, it's like not any one thing is a smoking gun, but
right.
the data taken in its entirety becomes more and more convincing, I think.
I understand what you're saying, and I feel like we could go through each of these categories in depth, maybe one by one.
I would love to. That'd be great.
And if someone wants to look into it sooner, they can go check out Forever Conscious YouTube research, yeah, channel. Geez, that's a whole lot. But now what I'm wondering, with all of this sort of bad news, do you have any we don't have to talk about it now, but can we eventually talk about some solutions, or like how do
Yeah, I
we?
mean, because we have sovereignty. The thing is, like religions and different things, they program us to with these certain expectations, like, you know, when you die, you're going to go meet your maker, you're going to be judged, or okay, you're going to
Yeah,
go and meet Jesus. And so
yeah.
and Jesus is your savior. And so if Jesus asks you to, which has happened, I've seen in these NDEs, Jesus, like if they can't get you to agree to go back, they bring a friend in sometimes, and the friend's like trying to get you to go back. And if that doesn't work, they bring an angel in. But I've seen where they bring in Jesus, and all of a sudden their whole attitude changes, and it's like, yes, my Lord, I'll go back for you. You know, it's like, so
Yeah.
it's just another way that, you know, so there's expectations and belief systems that we adopt can play a factor. And so what I'm trying to say is that we are these spirits that are eternal and infinite, and the main thing I get from near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences is that we can manifest our own reality with our intention. And you can like manifest anything out of thin air. You can teleport instantly anywhere else. You could like literally create your own realities, or like John was saying, there's millions of planets that are better that you could go to. And that I believe that we are, if you look at the near-death experiences, they say that we're translucent liquid light or plasma, like we are the light, right? There's like liquid plasma, not just this external light. So when you die, you're going to an external source. It could be like a projection of your own consciousness, which is part of this dream, or you can you have the power yourself of your own light to manifest, you know, your own reality. And that's what I'm saying is I'm trying to empower people with this message, and not say that you just have to go to the first option that
Based on your belief system. I mean, it sounds like when I was a Christian, based on my belief system, if I had died, I'd probably just meet Jesus and create my own afterlife experience,
and that's fine
tailored to
too. I mean,
me and my beliefs.
yeah.
But
I
if I'm
mean, there's no right or wrong. If that's what people believe and they
well,
want to
for
do
me,
that.
I don't want to go to I don't want my afterlife experiences tailored to my beliefs. I kind of want to get rid of all beliefs almost, and
Yes.
have more of a pure afterlife experience.
And
So
here's the thing, if I'm wrong and that turns out to be like a bad path to go on, I believe the lights, you can always call upon the light, and the light's going to take you back. It's like a prodigal son. I mean, if it's all loving and all caring,
true.
then from what I've heard, you can always call on the light.
Right.
So
Change your mind, come back and reincarnate. But I don't want, I have no
no,
plans to
no.
reincarnate.
Well,
I
that's
say
just
that in
it.
almost every one of my interviews.
Yeah, and if they're forcing people to come back against their will, like, I mean, here on Earth, if somebody takes something of yours without your permission, we call that stealing or theft. If they take sex without your permission, we call it rape. If they take your life without your permission, we call it murder. And they're doing stuff against our will without our permission. They're just sending you back against your will. That's got to be a huge red flag as far as I'm concerned. Why don't we have the ability to change our mind? And if they really need it for the system to continue working, there's walk-ins. There should be people that would, souls that would want to volunteer. Like, oh yeah, there's this long line of souls that want to come down here. So
yeah, that's a good point too. But you think that we're forced, or do you think we have to be, we're manipulated?
We're convinced, we're manipulated into, I think we have free will, but once you get into their domain, it becomes, they got a very hypnotic allure to them. There's like a, almost a trance state. There's all this love that you're feeling.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very euphoric, and you're kind of like in that, and if they present themselves as almost authoritative figures. Like this being sometimes is sitting on a throne. That's a power position, right? And
I've walked into church and it's just all the singing and the love, and you're like, okay, and you give into something that maybe normally.
And why would a God demand? I mean, there was one NDE where they asked the light who this being of light was, and they said God of Abraham. So if you look at that, well, then why would a God need praise and worship and all that? It seems like a kind of an ego trip. I mean, I wouldn't want it if I was. And then you've got this other, I mean, we can go into the NDEs, there's so many of them, but there was another one in particular, David, and he asked the light, what's the meaning of life? And you get a bunch of different answers on this one. So I'm not saying this is the only answer, but he was told it's for the entertainment of the spirit realm. Great.
Wow.
I'm glad it's so entertaining for you, for me to come down here and
hope you're having fun.
Laughed around.
Reality show.
Right.
Watching. Well, this has been very fascinating, Wayne. I'm on information overload, and I'm guessing the listeners might be on information overload. So watch it twice if you need to, or 3 times. But I'm really excited about maybe having you back, and really appreciate you taking all this time with me and sharing with everyone.
Thank you, Julie. I can't thank you enough. And of course, I would love to come back if they all want me. Share more research. I mean, don't shoot the messenger. I'm not saying what I know is the truth or it has to be the real. I'm just saying, hey, let's stop before we go rushing into this light without even thinking or knowing. And just let's look at all the evidence. Let's
look at the evidence. I think that's a good idea. Let's look at it very carefully.
And there are other options.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone watching. This has been Julie McVey with Unordinary Made Ordinary. And if you enjoyed this interview, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like the content that we're sharing on the channel, please subscribe. And I hope you are all having a fantastic day or evening, wherever you are on the planet or off the planet. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.